The street doesn't know yet. That's the first thing you notice. How completely ordinary it all looks. A wide suburban street somewhere on the fringe of Melbourne. The kind of street where the houses all went up in the same decade, brick veneer and terracotta roofs, and everyone's front lawn is just slightly better or slightly worse than the neighbors. Council bins are out. Someone's sprinkler system has kicked on early and is ticking away in the dark like a metronome counting down to something nobody can name yet. It is 6:43 in the morning. The sky is doing that thing it does in January, that slow bruised lightning, purple going to gray going to the flat white of a summer day that hasn't committed to itself yet. A magpie lands on a letterbox at the end of the driveway and looks around like it owns the place. It does, probably. Inside the house, a light has come on in the kitchen. The kitchen is the kind of kitchen that tells you everything about a family without saying a word. There are drawings stuck to the fridge with fruit-shaped magnets. Both of them old enough now that the drawings are embarrassing, but nobody's taken them down. There's a half-done crossword on the bench beside a phone charger and a permission slip for a school excursion that needed to be returned 2 weeks ago. A football sits in the corner next to the recycling bin for reasons that have never been explained and never will be. A man is standing at the bench. He's in his mid-40s. Dark circles under his eyes that suggest last night's sleep was more an idea than a reality. He's wearing the gray t-shirt and track pants combination of a man who got dressed without turning a light on. His coffee is steaming in front of him and he hasn't touched it. His name is Daniel. He is holding a piece of paper. He has read it 4 times already. He will read it a 5th. It will say the same thing. I want you to picture a Tuesday morning. Nothing special about it. The bins were out. The neighbor's dog was barking at something down the street. You know the one, always barking. Nobody ever does anything about it. I had a coffee on the bench, still too hot to drink, which is something I do every single morning of my life and never learn from. And I was standing in my kitchen, the same kitchen I'd stood in for 17 years, the same bench, the same view out the window to the same back fence, holding a piece of paper that was about to end everything I thought I knew about my life. He sets the paper down carefully, like it's fragile, like it might dissolve if he lets go of it too fast. The camera moves slowly through the house, room by room, the way memory moves. Not in a rush, not with purpose, just drifting. The hallway has framed photos running the length of it. Daniel and a woman in her early 40s, Sue, on their wedding day, young and loose-limbed with happiness. Her white dress catching a shaft of afternoon light at what looks like a winery somewhere in Victoria. 2 boys in school uniforms, the older one dark-eyed and serious in the way some 14-year-olds get serious, the younger one grinning with a gap where a tooth used to be. A family shot at what might be Phillip Island, everyone squinting into the sun. A dog, golden retriever, sleeping on a couch it's definitely not supposed to be on. The voiceover continues, slow and deliberate, the voice of a man who has rehearsed this story 1,000 times in the dark. 17 years. That's not a marriage, that's a life. That's the whole architecture of who you are, who you eat dinner with, who you call when something goes wrong, who you reach for in the night when the house makes a noise you can't explain. And in the time it takes to read 12 lines of text, a Tuesday morning, coffee going cold, all of it gets rewritten. Every dinner, every argument that nearly broke you, every holiday where you looked across the breakfast table and thought, this is it. This is the life. All of it gets turned upside down and shaken out. He picks up the coffee, takes a sip, puts it down. My name is Daniel. I'm 47 years old. I've lived in the suburbs of Melbourne most of my adult life. I work in logistics. I coach under 14's footy on Saturday mornings. I make my coffee too hot and I never learn. A long pause. And this is the story of how a $79 DNA kit, bought on a whim, as a Christmas present, as a joke really, told me something that my wife of 17 years never had the courage to tell me herself. The screen goes black. The magpie outside calls once, that liquid rolling warble, and is silent. White letters appear, bold and clean against the darkness. The DNA test that destroyed my 17-year marriage overnight. You have to understand what was built before you can understand what was destroyed. The year is 2006. Daniel is 29 years old and working for a mid-sized logistics company in Brisbane. Not glamorous work, coordinating freight movements, a lot of time on the phone, a lot of spreadsheets. The kind of job that pays the bills while you're figuring out what your actual life is going to look like. He lives in a share house in Paddington with 2 other blokes from work. The house smells faintly of old carpet and takeaway. He is, by his own admission, not living his best life. I wasn't unhappy. I want to be clear about that. I was just waiting for something, without quite knowing what. You know that feeling in your late 20s where you're watching your life like it's happening to someone else? slightly at a distance, and you keep thinking, at some point this thing is going to click into gear. That's where I was. The click, when it comes, happens at a friend's engagement party in October of that year. The party is at a terrace house in New Farm, loud, crowded, the kind of gathering that spills out into a courtyard and down the street. Daniel is near the drinks table, talking to someone he's already forgotten, when he hears a laugh from across the room. Loud, completely unself-conscious, the laugh of someone who has never once worried about being too much. He looks across. Sue is 31. She has dark hair and the kind of face that becomes more interesting the longer you look at it. Not a face that hits you immediately, but one that stays with you. She is laughing at something someone has said, her whole body involved in it, and she has absolutely no idea anyone is watching her. Daniel watches her for the next 20 minutes without managing to say a single word to her. It takes a mutual friend and a second beer before he crosses the room. She was talking about something completely mundane when I finally got over there. The drive to the party, I think. Parking. And I thought I could listen to this woman talk about parking for a very long time. That was when I knew I was in trouble. They talk for 3 hours. They swap numbers. He texts her the next morning, early too early, breaks his own rule about waiting, and she texts back immediately, which tells him everything he needs to know. They date for 2 years. Good years. The kind of years you don't appreciate properly until they're behind you. Long weekends on the Sunshine Coast. Getting to know each other's families, Sue's parents in Ipswich, warm and loud. Daniel's mum in Newcastle, quieter but curious. Arguments about small things that don't matter, making up. Learning the grammar of another person, all their private shorthand and particular habits. In 2008, they get married. 62 guests at a winery in the Yarra Valley. They've moved to Melbourne by now, chasing a better job offer for Daniel. And Victoria has wrapped itself around them the way places do when you're not paying attention. The ceremony is outside at golden hour. Everybody sweating slightly in their good clothes because it's February, and nobody thought that through. The speeches run too long and the wine runs short, and at the end of the night they slow dance to a song that was Sue's choice, not Daniel's, and he doesn't care at all. They honeymoon in Bali for 12 days. We talked about Bali for years afterwards. It became shorthand for us, for the easy version of us, before mortgages and kids and all of it. Whenever things got hard, one of us would say, "Remember Bali," and we'd both laugh. I haven't been able to say that word out loud since all of this happened. They come back to Melbourne and begin the business of building a life. Within a year, they have Tyler. He arrives in March of 2009. A difficult birth, 31 hours of labor, that Sue navigates with a kind of ferocious determination that Daniel will describe, later, as the most impressive thing he has ever witnessed. Tyler comes out small and furious and dark, with a head of black hair that the midwife says will probably fall out and doesn't. He screams for the first hour, and then goes utterly still and looks at Daniel with dark, ancient eyes, and Daniel falls completely and absolutely in love with him in a way that bypasses every rational process he has. There is nothing in the world like holding your child for the first time. Every cliche you've ever heard about it is true and also completely inadequate. The word love doesn't cover it. It's more like recognition, like meeting someone you were always supposed to meet. Alex comes along in 2012. Easier birth, louder baby, a child who arrives into the world with opinions and never stops sharing them. Where Tyler is dark-eyed and contemplative, Alex is freckled and relentless and funny, a dead ringer for Daniel's younger photos, the image of his father. The two boys are chalk and cheese from the start, and somehow this makes them work. Tyler's stillness balancing Alex's chaos, Alex's noise filling the silence as Tyler leaves. We were a proper family. Whatever that means, I thought I knew what it meant. 3-bedroom house in the outer suburbs, a Hills hoist in the backyard. A dog we never planned to get, but couldn't say no to when Tyler brought her home from his mate's litter. A mortgage that kept me up at night. 2 kids who ate constantly. A wife I loved. It wasn't perfect. Nobody's life is perfect. We argued about money sometimes. Sue thought I was too careful with it. I thought she wasn't careful enough. We were probably both right. There were periods where we were ships in the night. Both of us exhausted. The boys needing everything. Neither of us having anything left for the other at the end of the day. Normal stuff. The kind of friction that every long marriage accumulates like dust on a ceiling fan. But underneath all of it, I believed in us. I believed in the foundation. I thought, whatever else happens, we have a solid foundation. The camera lingers on the family photos one more time. Tyler at 8, serious and still. Alex at 6, the grin, the missing tooth. Daniel at a barbecue, spatula in hand, squinting into summer. Sue with her arms around both boys on what looks like the first day of school, her chin resting on Tyler's shoulder. To understand what was destroyed, you first have to understand what was built. So now you understand. Now we can talk about the Christmas present. Sue's younger sister Tracy has always been the family's enthusiast. Not in an annoying way or not entirely in an annoying way. She's the one who researches restaurants before everyone else has decided they're hungry. She's the one who finds the holiday rental with the best reviews and the worst photos. She is, in the words of her husband, a person who commits to interests fully and without embarrassment, which is both her best quality and occasionally an exhausting one. In late 2022, Tracy discovered genealogy. She found out she had this convict ancestor, some Irish bloke transported in 1843 for stealing a pig, of all things. And she was absolutely beside herself about it. Couldn't stop talking about it at Christmas that year. Brought printed documents. We all sat there eating prawns and listening to the saga of Michael whoever from County Clare, who apparently stole a pig and ended up in Van Diemen's Land, and somehow led 180 years later to Tracy sitting at our dining table vibrating with excitement. By the Christmas of 2023, Tracy has decided that everyone needs to know their genetic story. She buys 4 DNA ancestry kits, one for Daniel, one for Sue, one for Tyler, one for Alex. She wraps them individually. She presents them at Christmas lunch with the pride of someone who believes she has given the perfect gift. It seemed like a laugh. We all sat around the table and tore them open and read the instructions and made jokes about what we might find. Sue's dad said he was probably descended from royalty. I said I was worried I'd find out I was related to someone boring. Tyler held his up and looked at it very seriously and said, "What if we find something we don't want to know?" And we all laughed. We all laughed. The kits go in a kitchen drawer. Life gets in the way, as it always does. The boys go back to school. Daniel's work project, a major client transition that has been bleeding his time and patience for 6 months, hits a critical phase. Sue picks up extra shifts. January comes in hot and fast and demanding, the way Melbourne Januaries do, and the DNA kits stay in the drawer next to the batteries and the takeaway menus and the birthday candles from Alex's last party. It's a Sunday afternoon in the 3rd week of January when Daniel, with nothing particular on his mind, pulls the drawer open looking for a pen and sees the kit sitting there. Alex is in the lounge watching cricket, the sound of it drifting through, the commentator's voice rising and falling. Sue is in the garden, deadheading the roses she planted 3 years ago that have taken over one whole fence. Tyler is at a mate's place in the next suburb. The house has the particular Sunday afternoon quality of a place at rest. Daniel reads the instructions. They're simple enough. You swab the inside of your cheek, you spit into a tube, you seal the package and post it. He does it in about 4 minutes at the kitchen bench, writes his details on the label, and puts it in the stack of things to be posted. He goes back to thinking about the work project. He does not think about the kit again. I completely forgot about it. Hand on heart. I don't even remember posting it. I must have, clearly, but I have no memory of the moment. It just became part of the background noise. I was already on to the next thing. 3 weeks pass, then 3 more. February is halfway done before Daniel's phone buzzes one morning with an email notification. Your DNA ancestry results are ready. It was a Tuesday. I know that because I was already dreading the week. Tuesdays have always felt like Mondays with extra steps to me. I was making coffee. The notification came through at 6:47 in the morning. I nearly didn't open it. I thought I'll look at it tonight, it'll be something to talk about over dinner. But I opened it anyway, because I was standing there waiting for my coffee, and there was nothing else to do. He taps through to the results on his phone, leaning against the kitchen bench, coffee beginning to steam beside him. The ancestry breakdown comes first, a pie chart of his genetic heritage, broken into percentages. British Isles, 71%. Northern European, 18%. A small thread of Scandinavian, which he finds vaguely amusing. It all matches what he knows of his family. His grandfather Patrick, who came out from County Cork in the 1950s, with nothing but a trade certificate and an attitude. His nan from a small town in Yorkshire, who made the best sponge cake in the southern hemisphere and never let anyone forget it. He scrolls down. There is a section for DNA relatives. People on the platform who share enough genetic material to indicate a family relationship. The platform has matched him automatically. Close family at the top, distant relatives below. He sees Alex immediately. The match is flagged as parent-child, strong, clean, exactly what it should be. He smiles without knowing he's doing it. He scrolls further. The smile fades. Tyler's kid had been processed too. The platform had matched all 4 of us because we'd registered the same family account. And I could see everyone's results. Sue's results, Alex's, Tyler's. Tyler was not listed as a DNA relative of mine. He wasn't listed as a close match. He wasn't listed as a partial match, a half match, a distant match. He wasn't on my list at all. Daniel stares at the screen. He refreshes the page, the results reload, nothing changes. He closes the app and opens it again. He navigates back to the DNA relatives section step by step. He looks at Alex's entry, parent-child confirmed. He looks for Tyler. Tyler is not there. I stood in my kitchen and I refreshed that page 6 times. 6. As if the 7th time might produce a different result. As if I could argue with the software. I kept thinking, there has been a mistake. There has been a processing error. Someone has mixed up the samples. These things happen. I put my phone down on the bench. I picked up my coffee. I took a sip. I put it down again. And then, I'm not entirely sure why, I sat down on the kitchen floor with my back against the cupboards, and I picked up my phone and I read the results one more time. Same result. Same silence. The cricket was still going in the lounge. Alex was yelling at the television about something. The sprinklers had come on outside, and I could hear Sue talking to herself the way she does when she's gardening. Everything was completely normal. Everything was completely, utterly wrong. He navigates to Tyler's results separately. He finds in Tyler's DNA relative section a close match, not him, a man. The platform displays the relationship estimate, close family, parent-child, or full sibling. The confidence level is flagged as extremely high. The man's profile photo is public. Daniel does not click on it yet. He sits on the kitchen floor a while longer. I think on some level I knew right then. The body knows things before the mind will admit them. My hands were shaking slightly. I noticed that in a detached sort of way, like I was observing myself from a distance. My coffee was cold. I hadn't drunk most of it. The magpie outside was going absolutely berserk at something, and under any other circumstances, I would have found that funny. I didn't find it funny. He gets up off the floor. He calls the boys for school. He makes lunches. He drives Alex to school because Alex has missed the bus again, and he listens to Alex talk about cricket the entire way there, and he says the right things in the right places, and he watches Alex disappear through the school gate with his enormous bag, and he sits in the car in the drop-off zone for 4 minutes not moving. Then he drives to work. I went through that entire day on autopilot. I answered emails. I took 2 phone calls. I ate a sandwich I don't remember ordering. And underneath all of it, there was this hum, this low, constant hum, like something electrical that's not supposed to be on. That night, Daniel opens Tyler's profile on the DNA platform and looks at the photo. The man is dark-eyed, mid-40s, athletic. There is something about the line of his jaw, the particular set of his brow, that Daniel cannot look away from. Not because he recognizes the man, but because he recognizes something in the man. A face that rhymes with a face he has looked at across the dinner table for 14 years. He closes the laptop. He opens it again. He closes it. I lay in bed that night next to Sue. She was already asleep. She could always sleep. It was one of the things about her that I'd always half envied, and I stared at the ceiling for approximately 5,000 years. I kept running calculations I didn't want to run. Tyler is 14. This kit matched Tyler to a man who is not me. That man's profile photo looks like. I kept stopping myself before I finished the sentence. As if not finishing it would stop it from being true. The next morning, Daniel does something he has never done before. He calls into work and says he's sick. He's not sick. He is something for which there is no clean word. A man in the gap between knowing and not knowing, hovering in that terrible space where the ground hasn't fully given way, but you can feel it moving beneath your feet. He sits at the kitchen table and opens his laptop and begins to research. He Googles DNA ancestry test wrong results and reads 12 forum posts that reassure him testing errors happen, and 6 forum posts from geneticists explaining that for a parent-child relationship, the error rate is essentially 0. He Googles, what does it mean if a DNA test doesn't show your child? He reads for 2 hours. He closes the laptop. He calls his mate Tracy. Not Sue's sister Tracy, a different Tracy entirely, a coincidence of names that has caused confusion at every social gathering for 20 years. This Tracy is a man Daniel has known since secondary school in Newcastle. They grew up 3 streets apart, played underage rugby together, ended up in the same city by accident in their 30s and rekindled the friendship with the ease of people who have known each other long enough to skip the preamble. Tracy is the kind of friend who tells you things you don't want to hear, which is the most valuable kind. I didn't tell him everything. I couldn't say it out loud. Not yet. I just said, mate, what do you do when you find out something you can't unfind out? When the information is sitting there and you can't put it back? The line is quiet for a moment. He said, depends what it is. And I said, what if it's about your kid? And he went very quiet. And then he said, Daniel, "What have you found out?" And I said, "I'm not ready to say it yet." And he said, "Okay, I'm here when you are." And we talked about something else for 20 minutes, and he didn't push. That's a good friend. Someone who holds the door open without forcing you through it. 2 days pass. Daniel functions. He is present in the house the way a projected image is present. He takes up visual space, but there is no real substance to it. He helps Alex with his homework. He asks Tyler about the book he's reading, some science thing about deep ocean ecosystems. He listens to Sue talk about a difficult situation at her work and says the appropriate things. He watches them. All of them. He watches Sue with Tyler. That was the thing that was eating me alive, watching her with him. The way she ruffled his hair in the mornings. The way she knew all his little habits. That he needed a glass of water on his bedside table at night. That he couldn't eat eggs unless they were scrambled. That he hated wearing socks but would never admit his feet were cold. She knew all of it. She'd been learning all of it for 14 years. And the question I couldn't stop asking, what else did she know? That Friday, Daniel calls the number he has found through an online forum, a private genetic consultant who helps people navigate exactly these kinds of discoveries. He reaches her on the third ring. Her voice is calm and professional. He explains what he has found. He emails her the screenshots of the results while they talk. She reviews them in silence for a long moment. Then she confirms what he already knows. She was very kind about it, precise but kind. She walks me through the science. The percentage ranges for parent-child relationships, the confidence intervals, the way the platform calculates its matches. And at the end of all of it, she said, "Mr. Daniel, the science here is unambiguous. The man listed as Tyler's close family match on this platform is Tyler's biological father. There is no scenario involving testing error that produces this result." She paused and then said, "What you decide to do with that information, that's entirely human territory. The science can't help you there." I thanked her. She said she was sorry. I thanked her again. I hung up. Daniel goes outside. The backyard in mid-February. The grass is a bit long. He keeps meaning to mow it. The dog, who has been following him around all day with the particular anxiety that dogs develop when something is wrong in the house, comes and sits against his leg. The Hills hoist stands in the corner of the yard with a sheet on it that has been there for 3 days. He sits on the back step. He stays there until the sun goes down. I sat there and I thought about the man in the profile photo, about Tyler's face. About 2008, which is when Tyler must have been conceived, which means 2008 is the year I need to think about. 2008 is the year I need to go back into and look at properly. 2008 was our first year of marriage. We were newly married and we had a rough patch, a significant rough patch. I'd always filed it under early marriage adjustment, normal, resolved. I had never once questioned what was on the other side of that particular door. I was about to. Memory is not a recording. This is a thing that Daniel will come to understand in the weeks that follow with a clarity he would have preferred not to have. Memory is not a fixed record that you play back. It is a story you tell yourself, and like all stories, it is shaped by what you needed to believe when you first told it. When you find out something like this, your memory goes back through everything. Every moment you accept it at face value gets held up to the light, and you see things you didn't see the first time, not because they weren't there, but because you weren't looking for them. You were looking at something else. You were looking at the life you believed you were living. He goes back to 2008. They'd moved to Melbourne that April. Daniel's new job, more money, the city they'd always talked about ending up in. The move itself was stressful. New city, new routines, a rented flat in Brunswick that was too small and too hot in summer. Sue was job hunting, which she found more difficult than she'd expected. They were both stretched thin. There were about 3 months, May, June, July of 2008, where we weren't good. Not terrible. We didn't fight constantly or anything dramatic like that. It was more a kind of distance. We'd come home and we'd be in the same flat and feel very far apart. She was unhappy about the work situation, and I was consumed by the new job, and we were both not showing up for each other the way we should have been. I thought we came through it. We seemed to come through it. By August, things were better. By the end of the year, she was working again and we were us again, or what I believed us to be. He does not know, until now, what the distance of those 3 months contained. He searches, carefully, with the particular restrained desperation of a man who needs to know but is frightened of knowing, through the information available about Tyler's biological father. The man's name, it turns out, is not difficult to find. The DNA platform lists an initial and a surname. A basic search connects the dots. His name is Greg. In 2008, he was living in Melbourne. He had moved there around March of that year, which is to say the same month Daniel and Sue arrived. I'm going to stop there. Because I can feel your brain doing what mine did, and I want to be honest. I don't know the details of what happened between them. I don't know how they met. I don't know how long it lasted. I don't know whether it was one time or many times. Sue told me some things later, and I'm going to tell you what she told me. But some of the details, the specific details, the how and the where and the when exactly, I made the decision not to ask. Because some things, once you know them, you can never put down. What he does know is this. Sometime in the middle of 2008, while Daniel was learning his new city and his new job and not showing up the way he should have been, Sue and a man named Greg were together in a way that produced Tyler. And Greg is now in Tyler's DNA relatives list, and Tyler is 14 years old, and Tyler has absolutely no idea. I kept going back to Tyler's face. I'd sit at the dinner table and look at him. He was doing his homework one night, very focused, the tip of his tongue just slightly between his teeth, the way he always does when he's concentrating, and I'd think, who are you? Not in a cruel way, in a wondering way. Like meeting someone you thought you knew completely and realizing they contain rooms you've never been in. He was still my Tyler. He had not changed. Not a single thing about him had changed, and yet everything had changed. That's the impossible thing to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. Alex looked up from his dinner one night and caught me staring and said, "Dad, why are you being weird?" And I said, "Am I being weird?" And he said, "Yeah, kind of." And I said, "Sorry, mate. Just tired." The lie of the year, that one. Tracy, the old school friend Tracy, calls to check in. Daniel is walking to his car in the work car park, the one piece of time in his day that feels like it belongs only to him. He said, "Have you talked to Sue?" And I said, "Not yet." He said, "Daniel, mate, you're going to have to." And I said, "I know." And he said, "The longer you don't, the worse it gets." And I said, "I know that too." I think part of me was trying to find a version of reality where I didn't have to have that conversation, where the problem would somehow resolve itself. Men do that, or I do that. I sit with a problem and turn it over and over and try to find the angle where it isn't actually a problem. There was no such angle. That night he lies in bed and listens to Sue breathe beside him. The ordinary sound of it. The sound of every night for 17 years. And he thinks about the particular intimacy of sharing a bed with someone. How completely you trust another person when you close your eyes next to them. How exposed that is. How much faith it takes. I had given her all of that faith, every night for 17 years. And I lay there in the dark and I thought, she has known something that changed the basic truth of our family. She has known it, or suspected it, or been afraid of it, and she has said nothing. Every night. That thought, not the DNA result, not Greg, not any of the practical things. That thought was the one that finally broke something in me. He chooses a night. He calls Sue's sister Tracy, the original Tracy, the genealogy enthusiast, the one who started all of this, and asks if the boys can stay over on Friday. Tracy, who knows Daniel well enough to hear something in his voice, says yes without asking questions. He spends the week preparing himself for a conversation that no amount of preparation can actually prepare you for. I thought about what I would say. I rehearsed it. I had versions, the calm version, the controlled version, the one where I was measured and adult and did not raise my voice. I told myself I would not cry. I told myself I would not yell. I managed most of that, not all of it. Friday comes the way Fridays always come. Too slowly during the week and then all at once. The boys go to Tracy's after school. Daniel picks up the dinner on the way home. Thai, because Sue likes Thai, and then stands in the kitchen holding the bag of food, feeling slightly absurd about the fact that he has bought her favorite dinner on the night he is going to end their marriage. He puts it in the oven to keep warm. He sits at the kitchen table and sets the printed DNA results in front of him. Not as an accusation, or not only as an accusation, more as an anchor, something to look at when the words run out. Sue comes home at 6:15. She drops her bag at the door, calls out that she's home, comes into the kitchen. She sees the table set for two, the candle he has not lit, the sheets of paper in front of him. Her face does something. She stopped just in the doorway to the kitchen, and I saw something move across her face, something very fast, a flicker. I'd like to tell you I'm not certain what it was, but I am certain it was recognition, not confusion, not curiosity. Recognition. She knew. Before I said a single word, she knew what kind of conversation this was going to be. Daniel asks her to sit down. She does. He pushes the DNA results across the table. He tells her what they say, quietly and without accusation, starting from the beginning. The Christmas kits, the app, the January morning, the consultant. He lays it all out. He speaks steadily. He keeps his hands flat on the table. When he finishes, the kitchen is very quiet. Sue looks at the paper for a long time, the results, the numbers. The clinical language of genetics doing what human language has never had to do in this kitchen before. She didn't try to tell me it was an error. That's the thing I keep coming back to. She didn't go, there must be a mistake, or that can't be right. She looked at the paper and she went very still. And that stillness was its own kind of answer. Finally, Sue speaks. Her voice is low. She is controlling it the way a person controls something that will get away from them if they aren't careful. She tells me yes, there was someone. In the middle of 2008, during those 3 months, when they were distant and struggling and not finding each other, there was a man she knew through a work connection. It happened 3 times, she says, and then stops and says quietly that she's not sure why she specified the number, as if the number makes a difference. It didn't happen for long. It was over before she knew she was pregnant. When she found out she was expecting, she had convinced herself, needed to convince herself, that Tyler was Daniel's. The timing allowed for it. Or she allowed the timing to allow for it, which is a different thing. She said she'd spent 14 years being the best wife she could be, the best mother she could be, because she was terrified of this exact moment. And I believed her. I believe her. That part I actually believe, that she was running from this as fast and as far as she could run for 14 years. What I couldn't understand, what I cannot understand, even now, is how you run that fast and never fall down. Daniel asks his one question. He has been saving it. He has held on to it through 3 weeks of not sleeping and the Tuesday morning on the kitchen floor and the call to the consultant and all of it. He has been holding this one question in reserve. He asks, did you know? For certain. Did you know Tyler wasn't mine? Sue takes a very long time to answer. The kitchen clock ticks. The neighbor's dog, that bloody dog, barks twice at something down the street and stops. She said, I wasn't completely sure, but I was scared enough that I should have told you. That was the answer. It didn't matter. At that point, whether it was 100% or 50%, the fact that the fear was there, the fact that the question was in the room, and she chose to close the door on it every single day for 14 years. That was the answer. That was the one that finished it. The conversation that follows goes on for hours. It is not a shouting match. Daniel is not a man who shouts, and Sue is not a woman who shouts, and perhaps both of them are performing a version of control for each other because neither of them can afford to completely let go. But it is painful in the way that honest things are painful. It goes in circles. Sue apologizes repeatedly, sincerely. Daniel asks questions he needs to ask. He does not ask the questions he is afraid of the answers to. At some point, it might be 10 o'clock, it might be later, he has lost track. Daniel stands up from the table. He goes to the spare room. He takes a pillow from the linen press. He does not look back at Sue, who is still sitting at the kitchen table. I lay on the spare room bed and I looked at the ceiling. The same ceiling I'd looked at when Tyler was tiny and not sleeping, and I'd take the 3 o'clock feed so Sue could rest. The same ceiling. Different everything else. The marriage was over. We hadn't used that word. We hadn't used any of the words that come next: separation, divorce, lawyers, custody. But I knew. I think she knew. Some endings don't wait for the paperwork. It was a strange kind of grief. Not the sharp grief of something sudden. More like watching the tide go out. And you stand there on the sand and you watch it. And you know it's not coming back. And there's something almost peaceful about the knowing. Almost. There is a particular hell reserved for parents navigating the end of their marriage when children are involved. It is the hell of having to perform stability while everything is unstable, of keeping your face in a certain configuration at the dinner table while underneath everything is moving. Daniel and Sue do this for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of sleeping in separate rooms and telling the boys it's because Dad's snoring is bad at the moment. A lie that Alex accepts completely and that Tyler, 14 and perceptive, clearly does not. 6 weeks of polite exchanges in the kitchen, of working out who drops the boys and who picks them up, of the terrible bureaucratic intimacy of people who are separating all their shared logistics while pretending not to be. Tyler started watching us. I noticed it. He'd come into a room and his eyes would go to me first, then to Sue, then back to me, reading us. Kids are extraordinary lie detectors when they need to be. They can't name what they're picking up, but they're picking up everything. Alex, bless him, was completely oblivious for about 4 weeks. Then one Saturday morning he said, "Are you two in a fight?" And I said, "No, mate." And he said, "You're being weird." And I said, "I know, I'm sorry." And he shrugged and went back to his cereal. 12-year-olds are remarkably resilient when they decide to be. At week 7, Daniel and Sue see a family counselor together. Not to save the marriage, they are both past that. They know they are past that. But to figure out how to end it in a way that does the least damage to the 2 people in the house who had no say in any of this. The counselor was a woman in her 50s, very calm. The kind of professional calm that makes you want to be in her orbit. She said something early in our first session that I've thought about many times since. She said, "The two of you have stopped being partners. That's done. The question now is whether you can be parents together. That's a different relationship, and it requires different skills, and it's possible, but you both have to choose it every day." She was right. That's the job now. It's a different job, but it's still a job I want. The conversation with the boys happens in stages. First, a joint conversation, Daniel and Sue sitting on the couch, the boys at across from them, everyone in the lounge on a Sunday afternoon in April. The television is off, which alone tells Alex something is serious. They are told as plainly as possible that their parents are separating, that the house will change, that where dad sleeps will change, but that the love, that part does not change. That their parents love them absolutely and that will never be negotiated and is not on the table, Alex cries. Then stops. Then asks if they'll have to change schools, which is both a heartbreaking and a very 12-year-old thing to ask. They won't. Tyler says almost nothing. He nods. He asks very quietly whether this is final, whether it's decided. Daniel and Sue both say yes gently that it's decided. Tyler nods again. He says he's going to his room. He does. I didn't follow him immediately. I gave him about 20 minutes. Then I knocked on his door and went in and sat on the end of his bed. He was lying on his side facing the wall. I said, "You don't have to say anything." He said, "I'm not going to." I said, "That's fine." And I just sat there. Didn't say anything. Didn't try to fix it. Just sat there with him in the room. After about 15 minutes, he rolled over and said, "Is it my fault?" And I said immediately, without hesitating, "No, absolutely not. None of this has anything to do with you. Not a single part of it." He looked at me for a long time and then he said, "Okay." And then he said, "Can you stay a bit longer?" And I said, "As long as you want." The second conversation, the one about Tyler's biology, comes later. Months later. Managed carefully, with the counselor involved, prepared for in the way you can prepare for something you cannot fully prepare for. Tyler is told, in language chosen very deliberately, that there is something about his biology that he deserves to know. That there is a man in his DNA results, a man he did not know about, who is his biological father. That this does not change who his father is, that Daniel is and will remain his father. That what is being given to him is not a replacement but an addition, a piece of his story that belongs to him, that he has the right to. Tyler is very still throughout. He asks questions, he asks who the man is, he is given the name. He is told carefully what little is known. He is told that there is no pressure to do anything with this information, that it sits with him, that it's his. Then he asks the question that opens Daniel's chest like a key in a lock. He looked at me and he said, "Are you still my dad?" And I said, and I meant this with every single piece of myself, I said, "I will be your dad until the day I die. You are my son. That does not have a condition on it. Nothing changes that. Nothing in the world changes that." He looked at me for a moment. Then he nodded. Then he said, "Okay," in that way of his, that quiet processing way. And he asked if he could have some time alone. I went back to the lounge and I sat by myself for a long while. And I thought, whatever else is broken, whatever else is ruined, I got that conversation right. I think I got that one right.